Thank you, Senator. Appreciate it. And I really appreciate everybody coming out. Can you hear me? Um, when I compare notes with my legislative colleagues about legislative forums that they hold in their own districts, it's always impressive the numbers that we have compared to them that come out to shows a real keen interest on the behalf of our constituents, and we really appreciate the interest you show and the input you give us in these forums for us to do a better job for you folks when we go back to Topeka. I'll just briefly kind of overview what I think that I'll say the three primary macro issues that are going to be on the agenda for this year. That'll be reducing the budget, another 200 million. We did that last year. We're going to try and do that again this year. Property tax relief, that's been a topic of discussion over the past years. We've done some work in that already. We need to do more. The rub here is that the Senate, primarily the tax committee chair there and our House tax committee chair don't agree on how to go about doing that. So there's going to need to be some work to bring about some compromise to get that done. But I do think that it's a priority. I know it's a priority of leadership in both chambers. Water is going to be an issue. Jim Minix, who's typically here, couldn't be here today, but he's the water guy in the House. There's really no water guy in the Senate, so he's running that. He's been working on that for several years, and I'm hopeful and expecting that there will be some legislation that will come out before the session ends. My committees include the corrections. I'm chair of the Corrections and Juvenile Justice Committee. I'm vice chair of a special committee on government oversight. We worked hard over the summer on several issues, including DEI, food stamps, nursing board issues. We're going to continue to look closely at what mainly the executive branch is doing with your tax monies and try and make sure that they're using them as we intended them. I'm also a member of the Judiciary Committee, the Federal and State Affairs Committee, the Rules Committee, and so in terms of my own legislative work and what I'm focused on, I would just list the following. There's a juvenile justice reform bill that came out of my committee last session. It got bipartisan support in the House. It's now in the Senate, and I'm hoping, working with several of the folks here, Chief Utes and Lisa Southern, we're working to get that through the Senate process. Another major issue that we're going to be focusing on in corrections this year, we're not going to get it through, but there's a desperate need for a new correctional facility in Hutchinson. The current one was built in the 19th century. That would be like 1800s. And you go in there, and I've been in there recently. It's really macabre. Some of the cells are about the size of a king-size bed, and there's no air conditioning in most of the facility. It's a big ticket item. A few years ago, it's estimated to be a $500 million item, which would be bonded, but nonetheless, it's big. I don't expect that we're going to fund that this year, but my committee is going to be focused on bringing attention to that problem, and then hopefully in the next session and beyond, we can begin to deal with it. In judiciary, I have several bills I'm working and pressing. There's a sex offender work release bill. We want to tighten up the rules to prevent sex offenders from going out on work release, especially where there are kids around. I'm working on a gender marker bill, which we did that last week. In fact, I have a sextortion bill that I'm working on. That's where people are, using the internet and so forth to extort things by putting sex pictures of people on the internet. I'm working on a mandatory reporting bill. This has to do with the requirement that a lot of professionals in the state are required, if they have a suspicion of child sex abuse having to, they're mandatory reports to law enforcement. But there's one conspicuous absence from that list, and that is clergy. And the bill that I support would close that gap. Another concern I have in that regard is they reported recently that in 2024, we don't have 2025 statistics, there were 35 girls between the age of 10 and 14 in the state that had abortions. And I want to make sure that the abortionists are reporting those instances to investigators so that they can investigate and determine, who was responsible for the statutory rape of these girls. I want to know, number one, if they're doing it. And I also think in the mandatory reporting bill, we should increase the penalties for failure. Right now, it's a misdemeanor offense. That may be sufficient, but I also think we should pull licenses of any professionals that fail to comply with their obligation to report suspicion of child sex abuse. Let's see. I'm working on a bill that will change the way the nursing board works in our state. We've investigated that, and we think that we need to make some significant changes. I'm also working on a bill with respect to universities, DEI. We've already tried to take some of that out of the universities. This bill will be a follow-on, and will focus on the curriculum. And then I also was on the committee that looked into the food stamp problem that you maybe read about, the error rate, and the chance that if we don't lower the error rate in terms of determining who qualifies and who doesn't for food stamps, that we risk losing a lot of money in 2028, federal monies that come over. And then finally, I'll just mention a very local bill that will be introduced. I will introduce next week. Has to do with the riverbed. People may be aware that there has been a growing homeless population there. Groups in the community have already begun to work on that problem, encouraging people who are there to find work, find housing, and move out. And that's been somewhat successful. But we still need a bill that gives jurisdiction to the county to regulate that. Currently, riverbeds they're owned by, and believe it or not, we do have a riverbed despite not having water. That is all owned by the state, and the state is not willing to use the resources to regulate the activity there. So the bill would simply give the counties, in this case, Finney County, the jurisdiction to go in and regulate that activity. One last thing, the cell phone bill in the classroom. There's been a push around the country and in the state to ban cell phones in classrooms, and I'm pretty confident that's going to get bipartisan support. It was part of the governor's State of the State address. She supports it. Leadership supports it, so I expect we'll pass that.